These chest to wall handstand holds are going to be our first opportunity to start training our mobility and strength specifically in that vertical position, but whereas we're not limited by our balance because we're using the wall as our support, so we can log a lot of time under tension in this position correctly to start developing a good handstand. In terms of setup and execution of this movement, all the cues that we covered in our body line drill video are going to apply to being upside down. So when I get upside down, I'm going to be thinking about pointing my toes, contracting or squeezing my quads, squeezing my glutes, and then shrugging my shoulders into my ears while simultaneously thinking about pushing my armpit into the wall or closing the distance from my armpit to the wall. In terms of hand position from the wall, what I like people doing is I like people setting their heel of their hand roughly about 1.5 hand lengths from the wall. So what that's going to look like, one hand length, this is my second hand length, so we'll say about half is right there. So when I'm up on the wall, I want the heel of my hand right there. I always recommend athletes put a piece of tape on the floor, mark it with a little line of chalk, so you know exactly where you're going to every time, and we have an objective marker, so we're constantly training that same position over and over again, as opposed to being within a plus or minus. I want as specific as we can get when we're training this. In terms of setup or getting into the handstand position, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but for simplicity's sake in this video, I'm going to start everybody off with the half wall climb up. Whereas we start in this position right here, hand on the floor, foot on the floor, other foot is on the wall, and I'm going to use it to climb up onto the wall. So 1, 2, 3, and then I start walking my hands backwards as necessary. Now in this position, point the toes, squeeze the quads, squeeze the glutes, shrug the shoulders, push the armpits towards the wall, look between my thumbs. Common faults that I'm going to see with this movement. The main ones that I see with this particular exercise, and I'll demo all of them, is going to be, first of all, not keeping the top of the feet to the thighs or waist in contact with the wall, and instead what happens is we start piking the hip, and that may just happen because we're not keeping this active lower body position going through the cues I already talked about, or it could be we're trying to create this hollow body, or we're rounding our lower back, which we already spoke about in the body line video. Don't think about that. Think about keeping your spine in a neutral position. So the first one, it's a kind of combination of these two things where we're not keeping lower body tension or we're piking the hips. I'll demo what both of those look like. The next one is going to be not pushing away from the floor and instead letting the shoulder blades just retract, and we're kind of arching our spine at the same time. When we're doing that, we're not actually using our shoulders to support ourselves upside down, and instead we're just kind of relying on the bony anatomy of our spine or our shoulder blades to hold ourselves up, which isn't going to translate into a handstand. Lastly, another common fault is looking at the wall behind us. Please, please, please do not look at the wall behind us. When we look at the wall behind us, it does a few things. First of all, it doesn't train us how to look at the floor while performing a handstand, and when we're first starting off, we're going to need to be looking at the floor to have a point of a focal point to focus on as we're upside down. So we want to train that position specifically to the position that we're going to be at when we're upside down. So looking at the wall is going to train us how to apply all these cues with the head behind us. And when the head's behind us in a handstand, it's a much more advanced variation. So I want people looking at the floor for that reason, but also when we look at the wall, it's easier to relax the shoulders and not have active shoulders, as opposed to if I'm slightly extending my neck, thinking about almost peeling my eyes into the top of my head, I'm going to require more shoulder elevation or more active shoulders. So long way of saying, look at the floor because you're cheating if you're looking at the wall. All right, let me go over each one of those mistakes now while I'm upside down. So the first one being not having the toes on the wall. So think we're trying to do a more advanced variation, but really this allows me to be lazy.
Same thing goes right here. I'm trying to do something where I'm creating a hollow body or my hips are piking. The next one's going to be relaxing my shoulders or my spine too much. I'm not actually keeping active shoulders. Then lastly, looking at the wall. This allows me to let my shoulders sink down like here.
In terms of regressing the movement, we're going to simply perform what's referred to as a piked chest to wall handstand hold, where we're simply piking our hips, taking our lower body out of the equation. So I'm going to use a windowsill here. You can really use anything you want. A stack of boxes, a bench, a chair. Get creative with this. Understanding the higher up our feet are, the more demand or load we're placing on our hands. Likewise, the lower my feet are, the less demand I'm placing on my hands. So this would be a good kind of halfway point on our way to that full chest to wall handstand. All of our cues, all of our points of performance, everything that we covered previously are going to stay exactly the same, but I'm just simply taking my lower body out of the equation. What that's going to look like.
Bending my knees here, elbows locked out, pushing my armpits behind me, looking between my hands, still trying to squeeze my glutes, squeeze my quads.